Okay. It is 6 o'clock on Tuesday, the 22nd of March, and at that point, I call to order the regular meeting of the Wenatchee School District Board of Directors and ask that everybody stand up to say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Welcome, everybody, to this board meeting, and thank you for joining us. Doy a todos una bienvenida a esta reunión de la mesa directiva del Distrito Escolar. Gracias por su asistencia. The meeting is conducted in English, but we do have translation services so that citizen comment may be spoken in Spanish and be repeated in English. Si alguien quiere hacer su comentario de ciudadano o recibir explicaciones en español, favor indique su necesidad. Tenemos disponible un servicio de traducción. At that point, we move to the first business item on the agenda, the consent agenda, which consists of the minutes for the meeting on the 8th of March, vouchers and payroll, personnel report, surplus report, contracts, field trips, enrollment and financial report, and the annual asset preservation program board report. Before I continue, are there any requests to modify the consent agenda? Okay. That being the case, is there a motion to propose approval of the consent agenda?
Move to approve the consent agenda.
Thank you very much, Julie. Is there a second?
I second.
All right, eye contact. Catherine, you win. Okay, and is there any discussion? There being no discussion, I would ask everybody in favor of approving the consent agenda to say aye clearly. Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Okay. All four say aye. It is unanimous. The consent agenda is unanimously approved. The next item is citizen comments, which is the time for the board. Michael, yeah, I am right. Yeah. For the board to welcome and listen to public comment. Comments do need to be scheduled beforehand. We have a 3-minute time limit. I will warn speakers when their time is about to expire, as it isn't easy to watch the clock. And I believe we have one in person.
This is Jake's online.
Oh, you know what? I forgot to apologize on behalf of board member Laura Jakes, who's unable to be with us tonight, and hopefully will be able to plug in and listen to us as much as possible during the board meeting.
And I apologize. Ms. White, would you resend the link to her again? Just sorry, we're trying to do some sign language here, and that was not working. Yeah, you're.
Okay. Over my phone here. I had a wonderful meeting with Dr. Gordon. Was it this week or last week? Last week. It was last week. We're at Tuesday. So I just wanted to touch base on one of the aspects that I talked with him about in that meeting that I felt like we were on the same page with, and wanted to express those things to the board. And hopefully I have other community members who probably feel the same way that I do, that maybe will speak up. But I wanted to, which I talked about before, athletics being the great unifier that can really bring our community together. Before COVID, I took it upon myself to work with the schools, and Stamil was actually the sponsor for it. And I did elementary nights at the school because I wanted to involve the Latino community more in our athletic programs. And moving here from Pasco, which has a larger population of Latinos than they do here, I could see that there was a difference in the athletic programs. Not as many of those students are participating in those sports. I did not feel like overall there is a team spirit in Wenatchee for our sports program. And I have 6 children. We are very heavily involved in athletics in our family, and I've seen how it can really unify a community. And I think that is something that has been missing with our school district athletics. Maybe it's because we don't have winning programs when year after year after year in some of our more, the sports that you see that get the higher attendance, things like that, whatever it is. I have also seen that coaches are not reaching out to my 8th grade, 6th grade students. I've never seen a coach at any of the middle school athletics. They've never come talked to the middle school athletes. I've had to do all of the reaching out when it comes to, hey, what's going on even this summer? What's happening? How do we get our students to participate in sports? It's by creating it at the younger levels and working them up. I went to Royal City this weekend, and they have an even larger Hispanic population than Pasco and Wenatchee. And it is something to behold in that town. I would encourage you to go to a game in Royal City and watch what is happening there. It is a unifying feeling at all of their games. Everybody in that town is wearing black and gold. Every single part of that community is invested in their athletic programs because they have seen how it affects our students' grades. It's a unifier. It's a way to be more equitable. We really need to put more focus on athletics in this community, and it starts with good coaches who want to mentor students and be there for them. And we start that. One thing that we were talking about with Dr. Oh, I didn't hear. Oh, okay. And one thing that I was talking about with Dr. Gordon is like, let's start this even at the elementary level. These elementary nights that I did, getting these students into the games. Our games are really poorly attended for a town this size. Really poorly attended. It should not be happening. So I feel like it's the ball is being dropped. Let's pick it up. Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming and talking to us. Kim, do we have any other citizen comments? Okay, well, thank you very much.
Martin, can I just ask a question in regards to that comment? It's a question for Paul. So recently there was a House bill that was passed, about a year ago or a little bit over a year ago? For the fees that made sports more equitable across all students. Do we have data that shows whether that has helped in our district?
I'm going to phone a friend. And my friend's right over there, and she knew it was coming at her.
So we're actually collecting that data right now. It is due April 1st or something, close to that date. So we will have that data soon to look at that. I know that students are accessing that. So it's been really exciting. And we're trying to catch as many students up front as possible, so they don't have to go through as many hoops to be able to access that. But being in the first year that we're doing that, it's still kind of a work in progress. But I definitely know that students are accessing it, and we'll have more information soon.
Yeah, thank you. I look forward to seeing the numbers. And then, how can we as a district promote that to make sure parents are aware that such program exists? It's a requirement for our school district to be providing funds, uniforms, access. And so, I'm curious in the data, so looking forward.
We'll add that.
Okay. We have, actually, I think it's 4 special presentations, and ASB leads off. And do we have both schools? I saw Avery's there. You want to go first? I was going to make you go second if West Side got there ahead of you and turn the tables. But no, go ahead, Avery. Thanks very much.
All right. I wouldn't mind either way. All right. Hello, I'm Avery Miller, the ASB president at Wenatchee High School. Here at WHS, we've kicked off spring by putting together lots of activities for students to enjoy, such as the upcoming spring dance and our brand new Panther Field Day to accompany the Spirit Week leading up to prom. Relating to prom, we are also looking forward to helping with the prom dress giveaway that took place last year. It will be happening again. We will also be hosting the 25th annual Janice France Talent Show on April 13th through 15th, with this year's beneficiary being Sage, a nonprofit agency here in Wenatchee that helps to support and advocate for victims of violence and domestic abuse. Elections for the new executive positions will also be coming up, followed by Senate elections and the selection of our new coordinators. By mid-April, the results of the executive elections will be announced and the transfer of power will begin. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and quite a number of civic-minded activities. Appreciate that. And I can't read the names from here. Is Soraya or somebody from West Side ready to go? Okay, that's fine. I'm sure we'll get a double dose next time. The next one I'll turn over to Paul, which is the Air Force Junior ROTC report.
We're really excited about this evening, but I'm going to bring Mr. Jake Buholtz up to the podium, who's our director of CTE, to do an introduction of our new junior ROTC program officer. So Jake, with that, it's yours.
All right, fantastic. So yeah, we are very excited. We have with us tonight, we have hired one of our two instructors for our junior ROTC program starting next year. And we have Colonel Ben Akins here. He's going to come up and just say a few things here in just a minute, but he and his wife are here in attendance this week. They are doing some work. We had a very busy day today. We're connecting and to different organizations and both in the district, different positions, but then organizations outside of the district over the next couple of days. And then they have other things that they are working on here as they're looking around town and looking at the move. And I'm not sure if I said this, but they're coming from Colorado, Glenwood Springs, Colorado. So we are very, very appreciative of having them here and just look forward to all of the exciting things to come. So Colonel Ben Akins.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. It's very nice to be here. I'm excited to be able to talk to everybody and excited to be able to be here and excited to start this junior ROTC program. So just quickly, a little bit about myself. I'm an Air Force Academy graduate. I flew planes for the Air Force for a number of years. I have a master's degree in the equivalent military history. When I was looking to retire from the Air Force, I couldn't think of anything more important to do than become a teacher. So JROTC seemed to be a natural fit. I've been instructing junior ROTC in Glenwood Springs, Colorado for the last 7 years. Life circumstances have changed. Wenatchee has made this incredibly easy for me to come out here. Just as excited as the community is and as excited as the administration is to start a junior ROTC program, and the support that I anticipate having from the administration in this community, I think can make this program really, really special. So I'm really excited for the upcoming school year. I'm looking forward to getting started, working with your sons and daughters. And what questions do you have for me?
I'm going to begin with a welcome and just to say thank you very, very much for being here. This was something that came to Wenatchee through effort, but quicker and more dramatically than our hopes. So we were super excited and we're looking forward to it. And I think if any of the other board members want to make comments and or ask questions, I will hand the podium over to them.
I have a military background too. I'm an Army brat. My father is West Point graduate, and
we're getting some problems here.
That's okay. You're not a Naval Academy graduate, so we can get along. So I'm very, very excited. He's actually here tonight, so maybe y'all could talk afterwards. But I also went back and taught at West Point, so I'm very, very excited for you to be here. I think it's a fantastic program. I actually went to college on an ROTC nursing scholarship, but yeah, it's very, very happy for you to be here. Excited about this program.
And I was fortunate enough to be part of the show and tell when we were attempting to capture a program that you're now going to join and lead. So I hope that you have an opportunity this week to see everything on the ground, and that you get a chance to both like it and also work out with Jake and others how to make it really work perfectly.
Yeah, Colonel Atkins, just welcome. Ms. Atkins, welcome. As a former Coloradan and somebody who knows Glenwood Springs, you're going to see some similarities here of that. But we are so excited to have the two of you join our community, really raise this program up and be able to learn from your experiences of 7 years of being able to, accomplish that out in Glenwood Springs. The opportunities for our students, and that's what we always think about. That's what we're so excited about, that it's just another pathway for our kids to be able to explore with your leadership, Jake's leadership. The opportunities are endless for our kids with this type of work going on in our district. You've landed in a great place, and I'm so glad that you selected our school district, because I know there's a number of these positions out there across the United States. So I'm super excited to have both of you here, and again, welcome.
I'll just real quick welcome as well. And my background just a little bit. I did the Sea Cadet program in Oregon when I was younger. We didn't have ROTC at my high school, which would have been maybe nice and fun to participate in. But I did do a couple weeks of boot camp and decided it wasn't my thing. Actually, I was too short to fly the space shuttle, so I gave up my career at NASA. But I did really enjoy the program and the opportunities, and so I'm really excited for our students here because it does just open so many doors with so many other things you can do than nursing, to fly the space shuttle, anything you possibly want to do.
So what are next steps? Jake, Colonel, what are you guys working on? What are those big things that we should be looking forward to, either one of you?
Well, as far as the actual next steps, right now we are in the middle of the request process for students to sign up for the course. So today we spent time at Wenatchee High School lunch, Foothills Middle School lunch. Tomorrow we'll be at Pioneer and at Orchard, just to get it out there. Now that we have an instructor, get the instructor in front of kids, give them an opportunity to ask questions, get answers. And then it's just hard work of getting the facilities ready and put in place. Relationships. We had a great meeting with Civil Air Patrol this afternoon. So working on those relationships with organizations in town, which is going to be, that's going to be a lot of work, right? So that's where it lies in front of us. Obviously, he has to go back to Colorado and finish out the year there. And so this is just a 1 week time period here. So kind of getting through the spring, doing what we can, long distance, and getting things prepped. And then when summer comes, we'll hit the ground running and do what we need to do that way. So feel free to add.
Nothing really to add to that, but something I want to make sure is clear to everybody is that JRTC is not a military recruiting program. And so I think some people might be relieved to hear me say that. I am not here to push anybody in the military. If these students are interested in the military, I can certainly tell them where I think they might be a good fit. But if they really want to join the military, I steer them to a recruiter. I am not about pushing anybody in the military. I just want to prepare these kids for whatever they want to do after high school. That's entirely up to them. And I really enjoy working with the kids. And that's kind of the best part of this job. So anyway, I'm looking forward to getting to know and work with all the students here in Wenatchee. I think I made some pretty incredible connections with the young people back in Glenwood Springs, and it's going to be hard leaving those kids. But like I said, life circumstances have changed and, kind of things happen, and I need to move on. And I'm really looking forward to working and getting to know your sons and daughters and taking this program wherever we can take it.
Well, again, welcome. And I love your energy. I mean, it's pretty evident that you're bringing a lot of energy to this, and it's going to need that. So thank you.
Okay, actually, there are two newcomers to Wenatchee that I want to welcome. We just welcome Colonel Atkins, but welcome, and I hope this is as rewarding for you, almost as it is for both of you.
So on that note, the GRTC requires 2 instructors, and in Glenwood Springs, the other instructor resigned about 2 years ago. So I've been running the program for 2 years by myself through a pandemic and changing the facilities and all that. And the whole point is that she has been the other instructor. Maybe she's not getting paid, but I got to have somebody to talk to, somebody to bounce ideas off of, and she's just been amazing. And so even though she's not technically being hired by the school district, I want you to know you guys are getting another instructor unofficially in her. So.
Thank you again.
Yeah, thank you. And please do not feel obligated to stay. It's like you've got a busy time ahead of you. Thank you for making time though out of your schedule
Appreciate
for coming
that.
out. Absolutely. It was a pleasure.
All right. Our next item on the agenda is now remote. It will be our monthly equity program review update.
Yeah, Shannon is with us tonight to give us an update on where we've been doing these last few weeks since we last spoke to you, and it's been incredibly busy time. So Shannon, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you very much, and I will share my screen. So got a few slides to share. Thank you again for welcoming me to your meeting and making time for the equity program review. We're really grateful to have your support and really excited about all that we've been doing and the next steps that we're looking forward to. So by now this slide is probably familiar to most of you. These are the 5 areas that we are focusing on in our equity program review. So we're working with the district to help understand how curriculum, discipline, instructional policy, hiring and recruitment, and access to learning are presenting students with equitable opportunities so that each student can have the same chances to learn and succeed as any other student. And this is sort of the broad strokes of what we are doing with the equity program review. There's now a really wonderful website up that Diana and her team in communications have created. So we can make sure that we have that link available if you'd like to log in and learn some more. This is a look at our timeline again to show you where we are. We're actually about halfway through our work with you, so that's hard to believe. The time has been flying. We are on track with our deliverables, which is the bottom row there. We did decide to add one more step of reviewing the drafts of our instruments with our equity program review working group. And if you remember, the working group is a group that we have composed of students, family members, community members, educators, to serve as sort of an advisory group for our equity program review and make sure that we are representing a multitude of different voices from the community, and really to make sure that our work is tailored to the context and the conditions in Wenatchee. We kind of come in knowing the best practices of instrument design, but we want to make sure that the instruments are making sense and that we're asking the right questions to be asking in Wenatchee. So that's the process that we are engaged in with our working group, and I'll say a little bit more about that in a minute. But you'll see the little amendment to the deliverables is that we are taking a little extra time to finalize those instruments in partnership with our working group. So this is what we've been doing. We've been busy. We met with the equity review working group. We split into small working groups as a way to really give all of our working group members more of a chance to have their voices heard and to participate in a smaller discussion instead of, chiming in during our larger group conversations. So that was a really nice way to have members of our team get to spend a little bit more focused time with small groups looking at our instruments. So we split into 4 groups. One looked at our draft of a student survey. One looked at our draft of an educator survey. One was a dedicated Spanish-speaking breakout group to look at our family focus group protocol draft. and the other was an English-speaking group to look at the focus group protocols as well. And we started getting a lot of great feedback, saw that it would be beneficial to have a little more time. So we have added that second group on Thursday, actually coming up, to have a look at our revised versions of the drafts again before we finalize them. We just today actually got our student level data. We have executed our data sharing agreement, making sure that we're respecting confidentiality and privacy for personally identifiable information from students. So we went through a very careful process to develop a data sharing agreement and security protocols to access that student level data. So we'll be really excited to get started on that analysis. And also very excited to be planning our visit to Wenatchee. That's going to be happening from April 12th to 15th. 4 of us will be coming up to spend 4 days doing focus groups, and I'll say a little bit more about that in a few minutes. We've also been, with the support of the district, and particularly Diana and her team, have been developing communications tools. So a major one is a handout that's advertising a community event that we will be holding when we're up there in Wenatchee. That's going to be happening on April 13th. And we have a flyer that will be ready to hand out. The public registration for that event is going to open on the 29th. So again, I have a slide on that coming up. And also just additional outreach tools to help us schedule our focus groups at the schools. We've had our digital suggestion box open for a couple of weeks now, and we have been getting a few entries there, feedback from the community and requests to have conversations. So we're really glad that people are taking advantage of that avenue for reaching out to us. And, we are committed to having that transparency and that accessibility. So we do encourage anybody who wants to get in touch with us to go that way. Leave us thoughts. It's optional whether you want to leave contact information or not. If you do, then one of us will get back to you. And we have started working on our dissemination plan for our surveys as well. So we're really going to be focusing on that in the coming month. So we've been busy. And I just want to pause before talking a little bit more about the site visit to see if those of you there in the room who have been participating in the Equity Review Working Group would like to share any reflections, any reactions to the work that we've been doing together, or raise any questions, or just offer any feedback.
I feel like the work that we did at the last session it's very instrumental in just looking at the questions and the activity and how it's presented. I'm part of the Spanish speaking group, and so it's super valuable that we present information in the Spanish that is familiar to our community. So that was really important, and I know similar to the teacher group. We found so much value in it that we really took our time processing the questions and the information that we didn't quite get through the whole section, which is why we added this week's meeting. So I'm looking forward to concluding that work, and then just I think that's a step further in making sure that our questions are accessible, understandable to the community that we're serving.
Yeah, I also participated in the smaller breakouts to go over the proposed surveys. I was in the student survey group, and it was interesting working through the questions. Unfortunately, the students weren't able to join us because of other school activities. So I'm told they were able to participate later. What I've appreciated through the process is they've actually sent back the information, and I think we all got copies of it, maybe to look at some of the drafts and go. Okay, just the working group. We've been able to go back through and add, because it was a pretty compressed time limit once you really got into them. But it was great to be able to work through the questions, make some changes on the fly, and then have the opportunity to kind of revisit it and go back and see what what some of those look like. A little, we'll see how it ends. One of my concerns maybe in the process is the way some of the answers were drafting. It didn't seem like it gave very distinct variations between what students could choose from. I didn't look at all the questions. It would say something like, sort of like most of the time, all of the time, always. And to me, it felt like we could either compress them down to 4 or, and so I don't know if they've taken another look at that. I didn't pay as much attention when I went back through it. I was looking more at how questions read, because there were a few assumptions in some of them that we talked about. Should these be changed because it assumes something? But it was a great opportunity to go through and do that. And so I hope all the groups were able to do it to that level as well. And I think we'll get a better product for our district doing that. So.
Great, thank you. And yes, we spent quite a bit of time going through the comments and the revisions from the first meeting with the working group, and trying to address those as much as possible. So Maria, I'm not sure you'll even recognize the questions that you'll read in the second draft, because we really took your comments to heart and made a lot of changes. So we really appreciate the level of attention to detail that the working group is showing and the level of engagement. It's really going to, I think, make the work much stronger to have your involvement. So thank you again for that. So our site visit is coming up. We will have 4 of us from the team coming up there, including myself and Catherine Rooney, who I don't think many of you have met yet. She's a more recent addition to the team. Mary Martinez Wenzel, who many of you have seen her face on the Zoom, has, unfortunately for us, but amazingly for her, been offered an opportunity to join the Oregon Department of Education as the director of bicultural and migrant education programs. It's an amazing opportunity for her. We miss her on the team, but she sends her continued support for the work. And we will be coming up with myself and Catherine and Manuel and Karen, who are both bilingual researchers whose first language is Spanish. So we'll be doing focus groups in both English and Spanish. We're doing a lot of focus groups, 19 total student focus groups across the 4 days, 4 different focus groups with families, 1 focus group with educators to be followed up with more virtually after the conclusion of our site visit. So we are, with the help of the district team, with the help of principals at the schools, we're putting the groups together so that we have maximum representation. We heard that was a real priority to make sure that lots of different kinds of voices and perspectives are heard in these groups. And the benefit of focus groups is they are small groups. It does mean that we have to constrain and limit the amount of people who can participate, but the purpose of that is so that we can really engage in those deeper questions and follow-up questions with a group of 5 to 8 people who can have a little more time to delve more deeply into their perspectives. So, in a survey, you can ask a family member, do you feel welcomed at school? But in a focus group, you can actually say, what does that look like for you? What does the school do to make you feel welcome? What can a school do better to make you feel more welcome? Those are the kinds of kind of deeper and more nuanced questions that we can ask. And, we're prioritizing students and families on this trip, and we'll be able to follow up with educators more virtually. And one really exciting element that we are working into our site visit is a community event on the evening of April 13th. And that's going to take place in Wenatchee High School. We have a flyer that's going to go out soon with a registration link. The reason we're not releasing that immediately is that we are hoping to give our working group members a chance to share the information with some of their contacts, because the working group represents so many different kinds of voices and perspectives. We want to, by extension, make sure that our community event is also inclusive of, different perspectives. So we are giving the working group sort of a few days of pre-registration for their contacts and colleagues and friends. And then we will open it up on March 29th more generally. because of the building capacity, we are limiting it to the first 60 who register. Of course, there will be an opportunity always through channels that we've talked about, like the digital suggestion box, to always reach us with comments and feedback. And also surveys for family members who are currently caring for a student in the Wenatchee School District system. There will be a survey available for families to take. And with the survey, the more participants, the better. We have no capacity limits on surveys, so that will be another way to share feedback. So we're really trying to build on the communication and the conversation that we have started. And I actually want to yield the floor for a minute to Diana, because her team has been so instrumental in helping us get the word out and create these wonderful outreach tools. So she's going to take just a minute to share some of the other ways that we've been reaching out to engage with the community.
Thanks, Shannon, and thank you, board, for the opportunity to support Shannon in her presentation today. It's been a great partnership with the Wenatchee School District and Education Northwest as we go through our equity program review. Really, our role at the district level has been taking the tools and information that is developed by Education Northwest and making sure we create awareness about what the equity program review is all about with our public. That's really foundational to our work right now. We've done that in a couple of different ways. We've sent out a one-page kind of overview flyer that Education Northwest created about why we're doing the equity review, what's the purpose of that, and then how we'll carry out the work. That information was emailed directly to all of our families and our staff. We also sent that out as a remind text message. And then we most recently included a 2-page spread in both our English and Spanish version of Inside Wenatchee Schools, our print newsletter that has a circulation of 30,000 people here in Wenatchee and Malaga. So it reaches all of our community's mailboxes. They had an opportunity to read that. So starting there, really building that awareness. And then up next, as Shannon talked about, we're going to begin next week promoting that community event and letting our community know how they can participate in that feedback session and really provide their thoughts as we go through this whole equity program review, and then redirecting them to our website, as Shannon mentioned, making sure they know that suggestion box is available to them and they can participate through that. And then 2, making them aware when those surveys begin to come out, how they can participate in the surveys, again, using multiple channels to get that info out. We're also leveraging our social media platforms. And as Shannon said, really using kind of that word of mouth to the partnerships and relationships that our working group has to really amplify and spread the messages out to the broader community about how they can participate. So we'll continue coming along Education Northwest as we continue through this process and look forward to having a successful week with them here on the ground as we conduct focus groups and ultimately host that community event. Shannon?
Thank you. And hopefully this demonstrates that both the district and the Education Northwest team are really committed to this being an inclusive process, a transparent process. We want everyone to know what we are up to. And we want people to have a chance to reach us with any questions that come up. And we really want to make sure that we are elevating and amplifying voices in the community as part of this effort. So we are on track with our deliverables. We are, again, adding one more extra element of working on our instruments before we finalize them. And so we'll be able to turn in those final drafts at the end of this month, along with a progress memo. And the rest of our deliverables are coming up. April is going to be a big month for data collection. So it's been, a lot of the time it takes is to set everything up, develop the instruments, develop the plans, develop the protocol. So we're now at that point where we're tipping over into the actual data collection, which is a really exciting moment in the project. Our immediate next steps, Thursday, again, we're meeting with the working group to finalize those instruments. Now that we have our student level data, we're really diving into that analysis. planning for our site visits, getting our surveys ready to launch, and continuing to review documents that the district cabinet has shared with us. And I welcome any questions or feedback or responses at this time.
Anybody else want to say? No, go.
I just had a question. Can you maybe elaborate a little bit on how the student family groups are being selected?
Yeah, we're working through our with our principals and their teams to make sure that we select a really diverse group of students, not just ethnically or racially, just as diverse as possible, to get our students all different voices throughout each of the schools into that room. So really leaning onto our principals, but we spent a lot of time around what does that diverse look like? And it's not just Latino, Caucasian, the diversity that many of our kids bring to us each and every day.
Is it for representatives of all schools, or?
We try to do, trying to think of the number of elementaries. There's just a number of elementaries. I think all 3 middles and then the high school and West Side as well. So we didn't get all 7 elementaries, but we did get representation across our district from north to south to the middle of the district at the elementary level as well. Again, those are the 5th graders at the elementary. Does that answer it? Okay.
To clarify, so the principals are picking the
Principals with their team,
Okay.
their team of, how do we find this diverse group of students who the other piece was that we also want to make sure that students who are comfortable speaking in a small group as well, because that's different too.
Is that the same for families?
Yeah, for the families, yes, but we're also going to again lean into the working group as well when we get to that point.
And I don't actually have a question, but I want to make a comment. And Shannon, thank you very much for coming every month to brief not only the board, but if anybody else watches this, the whole community, which was part of the agreement. So I appreciate that. And what I hear and see listening to things today is that it is a very methodical process, giving great importance to that, that as you move forward through each step, you're adapting to local circumstances, and you're also taking the feedback and improving and modifying your program as you run, which I think is very encouraging to see. So I wanted to thank you for that. And I kind of wrote down that if you're looking at that, and I think this is critical with equity, which is something that needs to be studied, is knowledge comes before progress. And let's dig into the knowledge and look for the progress.
Thank you very much.
I would echo what Martin said. The working group, if you would have seen Shannon's last email to the working group, the working group is working. There is tons of stuff for them to review and make sure that they're all ready for the 24th on Thursday night. But it's been an undertaking, and really appreciate where we're at in the process. So thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
And thanks, Shannon, and then I'll let you go. The next item is COVID funding update, Paul and Jeanette.
So Jeanette is joining us. She'll be joining, well, Jeanette's gonna be with us every board meeting from here on out, talking about different budget. But tonight this part of it is focused on the COVID funding, specifically the second round of funding, and then she'll talk a little bit about where we're at on third. So with that, Jeanette.
Perfect. So I think first off, was there any questions from the board on the memo provided in the document? that might be a good place to start.
You answered mine.
Perfect. So I think just, high level, CARES 2, we have in a pretty good place as far as, solid information that we can actually count on. As we talked about the last time, a lot of our plans are, shifting in the sand, like a lot of things are right now with construction and just delivery delays and the cost of things. We're really trying to shift and make sure that we're spending the funds to meet the best need for students. So we're really just keeping that in mind. So CARES 3 and the CARES 3 learning loss funds have some pretty fair amounts and different things that are still in flux, and we're still trying to flesh out what's the cost of these going to be, when are we going to know these details. And so we'll be providing the board an update on those, hopefully within the next month or two, probably somewhat in line with the budget workshops as well, because they are very intertwined at this point.
As a reminder that the CARES 3 has a lot of the construction, the outdoor facilities. So that one, it's a huge fluctuation right now. So we don't want to be bringing to the board right now where it changes from this to that. We're working with our architect to really nail down those costs a little bit more accurately as things continue to change around here.
I would want to reinforce that about linking CARES 3 with the budget, with the timing. And, there's, as you say, there's a lot of uncertainty. Those two go hand in glove.
Mm-hmm.
And let's try and get the information from outside in time so that we have enough, there's enough time in the budget approval to do any adjustments before we get to the end. Thank you very much. The next item is first read of 3 policies. And I'll turn it over to Paul and the policy committee.
Okay, and Maria and Catherine, jump in. I'll do the first 2, the 5400 revised. Really, at the end of the day, it's to make sure that all the unpaid leave throughout the COVID-19 experience are used within compliance that the state outlined for us. As you see in you'll see a change from shall to will. Those are the big changes there. So nothing significant on our end. The next one is really around the bid request and proposal requirements. Again, falling in line with state and federal regulations. The requirements for going out to bid, or when you dollar amounts that cannot exceed, for instance, 75,000. The different dollar amounts that we have to adhere to in each of these. So this one, again, following new legislation, new requirements that the state has set out for us. That's what this one is about. There were no changes to either of these 2 policies from our team. Maria?
Yeah, so does this encompass the newest Senate bill that's on the governor's desk for the procurement, the school district procurement?
It would not.
Okay.
So they'll change that one more time. So
Yeah.
once
It's up to
signature-
January 2023 when it goes into effect,
Yeah.
so there's time.
Yeah. So yeah, once they sign that, then new iterations will come back to us. So the next one has been at the board table before. This is 1815. The board requested that this policy in 1825 to 1850, forgetting the other number. Thank you. You all got it all memorized. That the board asked that to go back to the policy committee, Catherine and Maria, to have conversations about. We had a healthy, vigorous conversation where to say we landed where we're at. What we brought forward to the board is just policy 1815. Remove the other policy feeling like that, trying to hear what the board said that the previous board meeting around trying to make sure there's clarity. 1815 brings clarity to what it is around the behaviors, around the objectivity, the selflessness, the stewardship, the transparency, and the integrity. They define those, and then added in that green part there. Failure to adhere to these core ethical principles or failure to comply with other policies adopted by the board or the law may result in, and this is where added in, a conversation in private setting between the offending school director and the board chair or another individual school director identified by the board, or discussion in a properly convened executive session between the offending school director and the full board. So that is what was brought forward to the board. So I'm going to hand it over to the board. Quite honestly, I hand it over to the two.
I think each of the policy committee representatives. Catherine, do you want to speak first?
Well, I feel like we've spoken on this quite a bit, and particularly us in the policy committee meeting. And the way I feel about it has not changed. Initially, I felt that the policy 1815 didn't really say or do anything, and then but we did not have the authority over each other to apply policy 1825. Now with 1825 gone and just 1815, it still gives us nothing actionable. And so I feel very strongly that we should not be passing or approving policy just for the sake of approving policy. I'm still there. That's where I am with that.
I felt we had a very good policy meeting last time where we were able to, really look at both policies, 1825 and 1815, and come to really consolidate both policies. One of the things that was pointed out in policy 1825 was, it kind of left the door open what good judgment was. And so by removing that policy and adding that one sentence in green, I thought we were kind of coming together and saying, okay, this policy is really about ethical conduct. And these are part of what our board values are. Like I said, we had really good discussions. And the concern was, well, is it opening it up for, other legalities, holding us more, opening the door for legal stuff. But just as a reminder that these policies are created by a legal team by WASTA, and this has been reviewed by our district legal counsel team as well. And again, this is just about ethical conduct, how we should be behaving. It might not apply to this board, but we're not creating and approving policy just that for our current board. These are policies that are going to be in place that are going to move forward throughout different boards.
Julie, do you want to say something?
Yeah, actually, can I go back to the very, very first policy? And then I've got comments on the one we were just discussing, but the leave policy, you mentioned that the wills and shalls were switching, but then there's that section below that's, I understand, blue, that was added about an employee that I'm not going to read it, but I just want to make sure if we adopt this, does this impact anybody retroactively that may have been given unpaid leave and now being told you have to vaccinate to be able to keep your unpaid leave? Okay.
No, we checked with Kelly. We spent time. Thank you for highlighting that. I just scanned right back through it.
Okay.
But no, we worked with HR, making sure that it was not going to be a retroactive aspect.
Okay. And then, so my comments on policy 1815 really haven't changed all that much either. I think if there's a place for this, it's more appropriate in our board norms. In fact, it in some ways mirrors some of what we've already adopted as board norms. It's not to say I have any objection to being and agreeing to be ethical. We took the oath. I think the policy statement itself is actually inaccurate because it doesn't actually say that we have taken an oath to support the constitutions and the laws of the state of Washington. It just mentions the constitutions. So I think that would need to be a revision. I think if we're talking in terms of ethics, I'd like to see it more tied closer to actual statutory language, references to the statutes. I have trouble with the objectivity, that last little section about choices need to be made on the merits. I think we could do just even without that. I think it's clear that we shouldn't be acting in private interest. I worry that not tying these close enough to statutory language with citations to statutes, we're opening it up for interpretations and things of that nature. And when we're adopting something that we're calling ethics, I think we need to be it needs to be pretty black and white clear if we want to call this code of conduct or code of stewardship or something other. But I think ethics is a very strong term, and I don't want to be in a position where I'm calling somebody unethical unless I know it to be in fact the case. And so I find this just to be opening up Pandora's box that we don't necessarily need to, that we could adopt more informally if really what we want is a mechanism to say, hey, I thought I saw somebody doing something that I didn't agree with, and having a process to deal with that. I don't think we need to adopt it as something as stringent as an ethical code of conduct, because we've already taken our oath to do that. And again, our recourse is from voters, not from one another. And then it just, again, to go back to some of the pieces that are in here, the transparency piece, I would just leave it at school directors must practice open and accountable government, leave out that they shall be as open as possible. I think if we're not, we have an Open Meetings Act that says how we're going to be open, what we're going to comply with. So I think that just sort of opens, it's unnecessary added there. And I think if we just said something like, you know, we're going to be open and transparent as required by OPMA, that would be more objective to what we've already agreed to do. So I'm not a fan of something that really feels superfluous to what we've already sworn that we're going to uphold and protect. I'm happy to include more details in our board norms if we want to be a little less formal, but if we're going to be so formal to call something ethics, I really want it tied more strictly to statutes. And just my pet peeve is right at the bottom. It says we will have a conversation between the offending school district director. Well, who made the determination that you're offending? It should be alleged offending. Again, we're using terms like ethics, and in my line of work, that's a very serious allegation and violation. So I am not particularly comfortable adopting an ethical policy just for the sake of being duplicative, or if we duplicative, sorry, of what we've already agreed to do. And it's not to say because I have any issue with what we're bound to follow, or but I think, like I said before, I think we're grown-ups and we know how to handle conflict. And if we have an issue, I think we've been relatively mindful about using our resources. So that's just my thought. It's still not where I would support it.
Okay, my turn to go. Two board members expressed reservations the last time we looked at the original draft of this policy. And I think it was a good decision to send it back to the committee to try and work things out. And there have been substantial changes. Policy 1825, which Julie referred to, is more like a procedure. Actually, pausing for a moment, I thought Laura said she was not able to
I
talk.
just wanted to make sure she had.
I'm here. I can talk.
Yeah.
Okay, Laura, could you please speak then? Sorry, I thought you were not.
Okay, that's okay. I don't have a lot of energy for speaking this evening, nor a voice, so my apologies for that. I essentially support the changes that have been made to the policy. I do take the point that using a term alleged offending board member is a good and easy change to make. It's really a softened policy that's just going to say we're going to hold each other accountable. To me, having been through what I've been through with the last board, not this one, it would have been a good backstop to have had at that point. I'm not opposed to having tweaks made to it, more references to RCWs, although we do have several at the bottom of the page already. Essentially, I'm in favor of this policy.
Thank you, Laura, for coming on and giving us your opinion, which I will then pick up. This is very similar to what you said last time. So I repeat that 2 board members had concerns, and so it was sent back for further review. And I'm going to address the concerns. The word censure was something that I did not agree with. I think that has been removed, and 1825 has been removed with it. Just as a quick aside, which I can bring before the group at the end, I also wasn't totally happy with the word offending. I might view the word affected, which is neutral, but so that's that. Coming to where I'm at, I'm glad Laura said it firsthand, because she said this would have been very useful in the past. And we cannot always assume that we will have board directors who follow good norms and handle it. And we do want a gentle, this is a gentle one, it's done in privacy, people can talk about it, it's an opportunity to learn and reform and take corrective action before you get throwing around hard RCWs and censures and stuff like that. So I personally think that is a satisfactory way of doing business. I see it as useful both in the future and in the past. And then I'm going to give my personal one. I feel very, very strongly that a public official needs to hold themselves to high ethical standards in the way that they expect everybody else to. And I think this policy does that. So before we move on, maybe one piece of word changing. If we were to go ahead, does anybody wish to get rid of the word offending and replace it with either affected or, I forget what the other one was, alleged?
Yes.
Okay, let's say affected. I think, because I think what we're striving to do is get teamwork in this in a responsible way. So from my point of view, I believe that we still have 2 board members who have either strong reservations or do not wish to see this policy in place. But I think it's been discussed twice, it's gone back to committee, and there is sufficient grounds to move this forward to a second reading, at which point it will face a motion.
Is there any consideration in changing the title from ethical conduct to something less? Because there's more than just what is RCW defined ethics. There's a municipal code of ethics, which I understand most of that is derived from, and understand we're talking about good conduct. But again, I don't like the idea that if I see something I don't like, I immediately am calling somebody unethical.
I don't think it's about calling somebody unethical. It's about us holding ourselves to high ethical standards. And I would say that a board member who is questioned and has to explain themselves under these may be making mistakes. I wouldn't go and initially say they're unethical. So I would turn it on its head. Ethics is what we believe in.
Yeah, I researched other boards and to see if this is something new that is coming to the boards, but there's several educational boards that have had ethical policies in place, ethical conduct policies in place. So, I mean, this is nothing new that we're kind of inventing.
Okay, I did before signal what I thought the next step should be from sort of the informal. We don't have a 5-0 consensus on this, but give anybody an opportunity to say something quickly. Otherwise, I would like this to go forward to a second reading.
Add that it probably should say that we've taken an oath to support the Constitution and the laws of the state of Washington.
And that I would not have a problem with, yeah. I believe the oath is the place that it's nice to key off our ethical conduct.
I'm fine with that change.
Okay, so we'll make those changes and bring them forward for second read at the next board meeting.
Thank you, Paul. And then that will be, nobody has lost their last opportunity to discuss this, I'm afraid, or maybe it's the right thing to discuss it twice. Let's see. Action item next is the calendars for the next 2 years.
In front of you, you have the 22, 23, and 23, 24 calendar. What you'll notice is the start date in 22 is August 30th. So it's about a week later than the school year. But as I've been informed, that has been a pretty fluid thing over the years in our school district. From that week to the previous week, they've actually gone past Labor Day as well. So Kelly, anything else that you might want to hit on that would be of interest to the board?
No, I don't think there's anything else. We really worked with a diverse group of people for this, working with learning and teaching to make sure that we provide some additional training throughout the school year, but not at the expense of additional days off. So we worked to move, like Paul said, the start date of the school year to make sure that we also didn't end the school year super late. And we do go through a calendar committee to create the calendar. And so it was a group of about 10 people, certificated and classified staff, administrators, district staff as well, and then send it out for a vote to all staff. And so option 1 was the winner for that for both years.
Board?
I have a question. Has there been much conversation about the ability to consolidate some of these more random days off into like a midwinter break like other schools do? I feel like this may be Groundhog Day and I've asked before and it's just a flat no, but entertain me.
I don't know if you've asked it before. It definitely isn't a flat no. We actually had a lengthy conversation about it this time, just given, I think, the stressors of the last couple of years. A lot of people we entertained it. What really got us stuck is that it pushes our school year out and or it eliminated the district's ability to provide training to our staff throughout the school year. And that just wasn't something that we were prepared to give up yet.
You know, the superintendent was in your corner though.
Yes, he was. He was very hard for it.
The superintendent was advocating for
Can we use any of the CARES money?
Let's keep the ideas percolating. I do have 2 questions, Kelly. I noticed that we've changed the pattern, and I'd heard quite a lot of conversation that people felt it would be much more effective to spread the training days through the year. So you've got 2 at the beginning, 2 during the year, as opposed to all at the beginning. So I assume that is a strong consensus. Okay, Paul answered for you. Then the other one that is kind of exciting in the 22-23 year and isn't in the 23-24 year is 5 days of classified training. And I'm guessing that that's a one-off opportunity to really invest. Is that correct?
When you say 5 days, there's 3 days.
Well, maybe 3 days. Sorry, 3 days. 31st and November the 1st and 2nd. You've got a classified training days and they're not on the other calendar.
They're all classified. I might have just not notated them on the calendar, but they are all 3 days for both calendars, classified training days. And we've had that actually the last couple of years. The state mandated that we provide training to our classified staff, and we find that to be highly valuable training to them. And so we try to incorporate it in. We also do provide it in the summer, usually for staff, if we're able to do so, just so we can swap out some of those days if it works better for them.
Okay, no, that's fine. And I guess I'm not super happy then, but just happy because I think training of our classified employees is one of the highest return on investment things we can do. So
Absolutely.
Sorry, I was just looking at the calendars. Just a word of caution for snow days. I think those are the ones that are kind of in gray. New legislation says no school days on June 19th. So just keeping that in mind, that might need to be tweaked to maybe push it out.
Yep.
And that's in both calendars.
Not gonna have snow next year. Yeah.
We did, if you guys, it's kind of hidden, but we did make one of our non-contract days in May. We made that a snow makeup day. So should we shut down for at least one day, which happens once every 10 years, we did incorporate that into the calendar for next year or the next 2 years.
That actually is my question. This year, do we know, did our waivers get approved for the makeup days or?
They won't make any decision for a while, but all indications are there will be no waivers granted. People will be making them up. We will be going, we're not adding to a day off somewhere else. They're going to be added to the end of the calendar, as we've already been communicating to our parents for a long time. So that's where they will be added. So anticipate it. We still have our fingers crossed, but we believe there's almost zero chance of that happening.
At this point, if there's no further discussion, I'm looking for a motion to approve the calendars for the 2 years.
Can I ask a quick
Sure,
question?
go
When
ahead.
does the community see this?
Tomorrow?
Tomorrow.
Okay.
And this is the time they start
Yeah,
asking, and they've already been asking. So yeah. So Diana will be publishing this out tomorrow and then again on Friday.
One more question, I guess. I assume this sort of generally aligns with Eastmont because I know we've got the families that split between the districts.
Eastmont has not finished theirs yet. So we win.
Your fault now.
Okay, I would like to make a motion to, for the approval of the 2022-23 school year and the 23-24 school year calendars.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Thanks, Julie. Assuming all the discussion has happened, will all those in favor signal by saying aye?
Aye.
And thanks, Laura. I think I heard you.
Yes.
At that point, we move to board communication.
I have.
Right. Laura?
Yeah, I have something. I just sent Paul and Diana an email about it, but I thought maybe I'll just share it with the whole board. I recently received a very high compliment for our most recent publication, Inside Wenatchee Schools, from retired Orchard Middle School teacher Chuck McCaney. Chuck is a 90-year-old Marine Corps retiree, decorated Korean War veteran. And he said that this most recent publication was the best that he remembers seeing ever. It made him feel included in the district news, and that he had a really good picture after reading it about what was happening in many areas. So I just wanted to say, kudos to Diana for her good work on that publication.
Thank you, Laura. That was very meaningful, and anybody who knows Chuck Mahaney knows that too.
I have some legislative session, but I won't steal your thunder. Yeah. I might have some questions or add a thing or two here and there. But I did get to meet Marissa Rathbone in person yesterday. She was here for the Small Schools Conference. And so we were able to meet up and just an introductory as to, the work that the committee does. We do have a new member training on Friday at 9 o'clock. So there'll be more training available. And on that note, I also want to say we kind of missed Classified Employees Week last week. We didn't have a meeting, so Paul will probably touch on that, but I just want to say thank you to our classified employees. The work that they do they're really the glue that holds the district together, and just know that their work doesn't go unnoticed, and we appreciate them very much.
I have a few things to talk about. Big surprise. I was invited to a service club last Friday, one of the service clubs that I had spoken at prior to being elected to the school board. And it was a fantastic afternoon. We talked for over an hour. What was exciting was they were curious to know what I had been doing as a new school board member. And I was very happy to share with them the school visits and the different things. But what was really exciting and fun for me to talk about was learning about the PLCs and sharing with them everything that we've learned about being able to increase our kids' grade levels up to 4 grade levels. It was very important to me when I ran as a school board, before the school board, to bring the public back to the public schools, to try to do my best to learn what was happening, what was good, what was bad, what was going on, and be able to share that with the community. So it was a really fantastic opportunity to make them listen to me for an hour about what is going on and what I have learned, because like I've said to you before, it's like, the amount of information that I've gotten in the last 3 months has been crazy. I have worked at it like a full-time job, and there have been some really remarkable, wonderful things. I think we experienced that a lot yesterday in our workshop, structured literacy, and those amazing teachers, Mrs. Hines and Mrs. Rennie. Mrs. Rennie. Like I said yesterday, I wish we could clone them. I know there are many, many more like them, but it was remarkable to hear their lesson, the lesson that they give to the students. And I just, I am again in awe of the work that they do, how devoted they are to it, and the science of it. The science that this is not just random. We're hoping that this will work, and we're hoping that this will bring our kids' grades up, that it is actually based on science and will really make a difference in our students' lives. It was very interesting to see how important it was to you, because this is your background, and that was neat to see as well. So the teaching and learning groups, as I said yesterday too, I could do a workshop every week. I look forward to going back to the schools, the appointments that we've made to go back and see the other PLCs and get introduced into the elementary school. But again, I really wish that the community could have an opportunity to see these workshops that we have been doing. And I guess they can on Zoom, but I would just encourage our community members, our families, our parents that were so interested during the election into what was going on, how we were going to bring our students back up to level. I'd encourage them to watch one of these workshops, because it is amazing, and it shows the dedication of the educators and the teaching and learning group. And I am truly happy and excited to share that with the public. On another note, I was asked to meet with one of our state legislators who had recently been invited into a couple of our schools by teachers. And what he came away with from that meeting was the discouragement that teachers have right now in the accountability of our students. And so I would like to, they expressed a lot to this particular legislator, and he was able to share that with me. And I felt really kind of like I wanted to say that we know our students have been through probably one of the worst events of their life, that they will look back and see it as one of the most difficult times of their life. And I think that in that respect, we have allowed a lot of leniency, less accountability for them. And I think that it is important for us to now, looking forward to, in support of our educators, ask our students to start stepping up, start being accountable, start being, showing up to school, not missing school, being respectful to their educators, considering what they're doing disciplinary wise, and really remembering that the educators are only in this work because they care so deeply about them and want such a good future for them. I think that the last 2 years, I think we all agree, did a lot of damage to our kids. And I am afraid that because we wanted to help them along so much, we have let a lot of the accountability go. And it's time for us to look at that as the adults in the room and say, okay, we've got to hold you accountable now for your attendance, your grades, your assignments, and really stick to that, because we are not doing them any favors otherwise. That in life will show them after they get out of our school district that they will be held accountable for their actions and the things that they're doing and not doing. And so I just wanted to express that because of that teacher meeting and then the meeting that I had afterwards. Again, I'm speaking to my own child. I have a child in high school, but I think that it's something that we need to agree on as educators and board members and community members, that it's time to start holding them accountable, because that will only help them in the long run.
Thanks, Catherine. And I'll go last then, unless, yeah, okay, I am. I want to add you want?
No, you're good.
Okay, that's right. I didn't want to preempt anybody, no. I also want to give my gratitude after Classified Week to all our classified staff, and thank you very, very much. Over the weekend, I was at a quarterly meeting of the State Advisory Committee on Migrant Education, and it was the most solid and substantive meeting that I've been to, actually. And if you talk about accountability and helping families and students to realize the importance of education, that was front and center, including the method and how to do it. But if I had to pick one highlight, it would be a one-page, where they called it a Heart of the Conference poem. It was aspirations written in Spanish by migrant students from west of the Cascades, where they're scattered around, based out of the ESD on that side. And it really was quite informative. And we have our own youth group, youth voice group, developing to advise our superintendent. And I think something like that might be useful to go in there. So I think that reinforces the work we're doing, and we see the value of it elsewhere in the state. The other thing I was going to talk about was we do care about the whole student. If you're in the high school and you help with the high school and beyond pathway, picking up on what you say, part of that is the discipline to know that you've got your grades to graduate and work your way through, and that you've got to survive after life. And we do want, obviously, literacy and mathematical numeracy to be the core, but really we should be interested in the whole student, with the intangibles that affect their emotional well-being and experiences. And so I enjoyed going to two things in the last 2 weeks. One was the annual regional high school art exhibition at the museum, which I like to go to every year. And that's really important. Students from Wenatchee High School were exhibited there, and some of them go on to state. And then the other one is during the closure of schools in the pandemic, I particularly appreciated the Zoom concerts given by Newbury. Now, they weren't the only school. We had dramatic, synchronized pods, people doing a video play from the high school. Foothills performed, but Newbury was the one that I particularly enjoyed as being from an elementary school. So now that we're in person, I asked if I could go to their 4th grade strings concert this week. Fun to see it, and to see the enthusiasm for our students to broaden themselves, to get the intangibles out of life more than just survival. So I think when you look around the community, and this is mostly done in partnership with the community, with the school district being part of it, to widen the opportunities for enrichment of their lives of the whole community. I think that's really, really important in what we do. And I just wanted to kind of celebrate that.
All right, board, thank you so much. I want to tag on to the classified employees and the incredible work that they do each and every day to open our buildings, to bring our students in, to maintain our facilities, to welcome people into our buildings, to do the day-to-day operations. They truly are. They make a difference in the lives of our kids, and we could not run our schools without our classified employees. Just eternally grateful for them. I sent out a letter to our classified throughout our whole staff, just thanking them for their work, for their service. So thank you for highlighting that, board members. Next, in my superintendent update is the legislative board update. Jeanette's going to walk us through some pretty consequential decisions that the legislators made in the closing days of the budget. So Jeanette, with that, you're going to need water because I know this is a fairly lengthy presentation. So Jeanette, it's yours.
Perfect. And before we jump into that good time, I wanted to provide the board an update on something that we've been talking about last budget session. And so kind of bringing that back up. So we had talked last year during the budget about the softball fields and that we need to build some softball fields on district premises, hopefully, so that we are Title IX compliant, because we do have baseball fields, but we don't have softball fields for the women. So I wanted to give the board an update kind of on the timeline of things and let you know that, we're still working on it and we're kind of in a holding pattern at this point. But actually back in February 2020, rewind like 2 years, which seems like 6. So the board actually gave consensus to move forward with looking at a bond proposal. And looking at some facility updates, and the softball fields were heavily a part of that. So definitely on the forefront there. And then, we all know what happened in March. So fast forward a little over a year, and we actually met with a parent in the softball community. Paul and I did, and heard his concerns. Immediately after that, we really started kind of putting in some more heavy work on this. So we met with our architects, talked about plans, looked at what was proposed potentially in the last bond. Is that still going to work? Really kind of starting that process a little bit and pulling it outside of the bond process. So, really making sure that we're doing right by the girls and not necessarily just tying it to a bond. So really looking at that, we talked in the June board meeting also about, needing to potentially spend some money to fund those. I think the number we used then was $5 million. So I think y'all probably remember that conversation. Then in September, we received an estimate from our architects actually using some undeveloped land that the district owns. Based on that estimate, we went back to the drawing board as far as sites and really, sharpened our pencils and said, okay, where else can we put these softball fields that maybe is a little bit more budget friendly. So after that, we actually received a letter from, I believe it's the State Office of Civil Rights. So we received a letter, basically it's a formal complaint. And so we have been engaged in the formal complaint process since basically October. We also did meet with the PUD to talk about some options. That's the current group that we use their fields. Ultimately, unfortunately, we weren't able to kind of come to an agreement on a partnership that would work. Then in November, we completed a voluntary resolution agreement with the Office of Civil Rights. So basically just outlining and saying, yes, we know we're out of compliance. We want to try to fix this. So essentially that helps us speed up the process. So we're able to get to our goal of having softball fields sooner. Then, keep we kept meeting with the architects, really talking about the properties and the options and details. In February, we received a basically high-level drawing that we feel like is going to hopefully be something that we can move forward with. Also in February, and first part of March, we submitted a district assessment, basically our response to the voluntary resolution agreement. And really that's just a deep dive assessment into the differences in facilities and access between the boys baseball team and the girls softball team. So we submitted that. And at this point, we're waiting for OCR's response to our assessment to be able to move forward and hopefully, really dive deeper and move a little bit quicker on, hopefully being able to dig some dirt pretty soon on these softball fields. Any questions on the softball fields?
How many fields?
That's, yeah. A lot of those details, we're gonna have to wait for the OCR to come back to us. It's literally in their court. There's nothing anybody can do until they tell us what steps to take next. They'll review our submission and then we will engage with them. But at this point, our only engagement is sending it off to them. So once we know more, we'll move, but we literally cannot move. We can't do anything right now until they tell us what our next steps are. What's that? Ooh, dang it. That was like, that was a softball. I had to come back. We're here all night.
So Paul, there was some community members that were asking questions that wanted to know where it was at. Can we reply email?
Yes, I've informed that individual in that group exactly where we're at. And it is frustrating. I get it. But this is one that is literally out of our hands, out of our field. It is in somebody else's. And once they respond back to us, we'll move accordingly. We feel like we have a good plan, a plan that is thoughtful from a budgetary standpoint. And that we would like to engage the board, but we literally have to wait for them to say, are we in the right place or not?
Okay, on to the next fun topic. So as you guys know, the legislature completed their work. So we're going to review that work. So this first slide is really a high level looking at the state budget overall. So not necessarily just looking at the K-12 items. So on the left side, you'll see the percentage of K-12 funding that was in the state operating budget in each of the bienniums, and then what was also passed in the supplemental. So what's something that's very interesting to me is you guys might remember in about 2019, 2018, actually the 2018 supplemental budget, that was when the McCleary funding came through. So that was when the big changes in the salaries came through, the change in the levy authority, all of that came through in the 2018 supplemental budget. And so those next 2 years were really had some big changes as far as the percentage of funding within the state budget that went to K-12. So it really put the spotlight on K-12. You know, the legislature is making their big statement. Our main priority is K-12 education. It's our paramount duty. We're in this. So that's something you'll see in that 2018 supplemental budget, and then the 2019-21 biennium being at above that 50% threshold. And then the supplemental budget in 2020 dropped that down to about 51%. And then we get to the 21-23 biennium, which was passed last summer. And so that dropped the percentage for K-12 out of the total state budget to 48. And then we took a pretty sharp dive in the 22 supplemental budget that they just completed. And K-12 represents about 43% of the state budget at this point. So just in the last 4 years, we've dropped 9 percentage points of the whole state legislative budget. You know, we heard a lot that the legislature after McCleary was very tired of hearing about K-12 education and was about ready to just be done with it. And so, you know, unfortunately, I think we're seeing it a little bit in the numbers. You know, we press as hard as we can as a group to really make sure the legislature understands what the impacts of their changes are, while also trying to, you know, promote K-12 and make sure that, you know, the funding that we need comes through. So it's a little bit disheartening to see that, but, you know, we'll continue on. So this is really focused on the K-12 portion. So the subject to outlook, which is the first section, so that really is the state's budget, but it does not include the federal appropriations that they have, so any federal grants and things like that. And then also it does not include the federal coronavirus relief fund that they've created. And so that basically, you could kind of look at that as like, that's the continuing funds, essentially. And you see that very large net reduction of almost $500 million. And then the bottom part with the total budgeted, so that includes the federal funds and the federal coronavirus relief fund as well. Policy level, just so we can kind of understand terms here, policy level is really discretionary spending and changes, legislative choices that they can make at the policy level, either affecting current programs or creating new programs. And it can be one-time funding or long-term funding. It's all across the board. Maintenance level, those are required changes in spending, mostly due to inflation. Caseload or enrollment. The big reason for the decline this year is overall statewide enrollment is way down. So that really decreases the amount maintenance-wise that the state needs to provide to school districts, because our funding is primarily based on students and enrollment. So any questions on what I've gone through so far? We're gonna, again, take this nice and slow. Legislative budget is super fun. Perfect. Okay, so the first thing we'll go over is some minor items. So there was a number of things that will be helpful but aren't necessarily super impactful to the district. Allowing for electronic collection of household income surveys. That was something we talked about at the last board meeting as well. You know, how do we collect that information from families if they're able to eat free? What's the incentive for them? So that just is one more allowable option for us, so parents don't have to physically come in. Also, a House bill is now allowing, and if it's effective immediately once the governor signs it, allows retirees to work up to 1,040 hours. Currently, they're only allowed to work 867 hours a year before it impacts their retirement pay. So what the legislature is really hoping to do here is to help ease our staffing burdens. So those teachers and classified staff that have retired recently, or maybe not so recently, if they want to come back and sub or take a long-term, maybe a long-term leave assignment, that kind of thing, they have some more flexibility to do that. So hopefully that helps. We will see. But that's actually 3 school years that they approved that for. So that's longer than I anticipated them doing that. National long-term or national board bonuses, those increased basically by inflation. SEB, which is the employee medical insurance. So we receive funding from the state per funded staffing unit, which we'll talk about later. But that amount actually increased per staff member. And so that's really just a pass through for us for those funded staff units. Minor change in retirement, creation of a safety net for pupil transportation. So, if you have really high cost special ed routes, those kinds of things, you can apply for safety net, which is similar to what we do for special ed. Also, just interesting financial literacy education. There's a professional development grant that they put in there. So that's exciting. Another kind of sad note, the capital budget decreased by about $85 million. Most of that is due to schools not doing as much construction right now. And so the state obligation for that state match and that SCAP, school construction assistance program funding, is not as needed. So that's kind of a bummer, but we understand. So another good one for kids and families. So House Bill 1878 is now requiring all schools that are above 40% free and reduced to be enrolled in the federal community eligibility provision program, which allows access for free meals for all students in that school. So the only schools that don't meet that threshold for Wenatchee are Sunny Slope, Valley, and Washington. So we can also group schools together to achieve that 40%. So that'll be something we look into. The change basically adds Wenatchee High School, which we had already applied and gotten approved for them. And then also Foothills and Newberry will be added. So I'm going to be working over the next few months with our food services director to work on a process and see if potentially we can fold in those other 3 sites. Equity looking, it doesn't look so great to have just 2 schools that don't meet that qualification. So we're going to try. So I will provide more information once we know that. Also, the legislature realizes that not all schools receive 100% reimbursement from the federal government. If you have closer to that 40, 50, 60% threshold, you're not going to, break even realistically. So they've provided some funding to help with that. Any questions on that? Okay, now we're getting into the heavy stuff. So one of the things that was added into the budget language, there was actually no separate bill. It's knee deep in the 860-page budget document. Is language that the legislature is basically directing OSPI to create rules around limitations for transitional kindergarten enrollment. As we talked about at the last board meeting, our hope was to expand our current transitional kindergarten program. So honestly, the language is pretty vague in the budget. It doesn't say what they want the limitations to be, what the problem is with TK, why they want to limit it or change it, anything like that. We've submitted a letter to the governor's office and to OSPI and a handful of their friends, along with several other school districts, probably quite a number of school districts across Washington that have submitted veto request letters to Governor Inslee in hopes that he vetoes the language before he adopts the budget. And he has until March 31st to do that. So we're unfortunately kind of on hold at this point.
Can I add? So one of the things that was discussed at the legislative meeting was to present this information to our school boards and see if we as a board can write a letter to support the veto of that portion of the bill. This was priority number 4 for WASDA, so it's pretty high up there. And, you know, if as a board as a whole, if we're interested, it's something maybe we can support.
Can we discuss this quickly right now? I think it's an excellent idea to ask if we can have a letter drafted for us to review.
We absolutely can. We'll share the letter that we submitted.
Okay.
And then we can draft something similar for the board and get the board's approval. We'll get that moving forward if that's
Or
what the
we
board
could
would like.
endorse the letter if that is equally effective.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
WASDA had a template letter
Oh,
too that
perfect.
I can.
Would you send that to me?
I love flooding Governor Inslee's inbox. Okay. Maybe. Oh. Nope. There it goes. So the next piece of good news is hold harmless for some of our grant funding. And so there's 2 pieces to this. Just like last year, they are doing a hold harmless for our LAP funds, which is Learning Assistance Program. So that supports a lot of work at the elementary schools primarily. And so we're able to use our 1920 free and reduced rates versus our 21-22 free and reduced rates. So that's about 4% higher. We'll take the 4%. The other really exciting piece was LAP high poverty schools that were eligible in 21-22, but we're going to drop off in 22-23 are actually being held harmless. So that means that Foothills gets to keep their LAP high poverty funds for 1 more year. So that was very exciting news in my office.
Can I ask a quick question there, Jeanette? If you were to look another year ahead, I'm just reading that and you're saying 1920, we had a higher poverty rate. What do you expect outlook wise, just from the statistics? And then what do you see in the budgetary climate at the state?
So as far as free and reduced rates, it's, you know, I think our uphill battle, honestly, is going to be getting that data from parents, especially if most or all of our schools are 100% free meals. We need a way to still collect that information through the family survey process to be able to, you know, offer these great programs in our grants. And so we're going to really have to do some digging on what's a good way to collect that information and to incentivize families to be able to provide that. You know, hopefully the electronic piece will help so that, you know, some of our families are able to just do it that way. They don't have to worry about dropping something at their kid's school or sending it in their backpack and maybe it gets lost, or, you know, all the things that happen. So, you know, hopefully that's a good thing. You know, I think as far as our poverty rate goes, if we can get that participation up, I think our free and reduced is actually lower. When you look at the numbers on face value right now from the data we have, then it probably actually is. So if we're able to collect that information from families, then my hope is that we get a more accurate picture, and that helps the long run. A lot of things in our world are kind of a lag year behind. And so hopefully that data collection will help us. Long-term, Foothills honestly was less than 0.5% away from the 50% threshold. I was like, do you round? Come on, help us out here. So there is the potential, if we do get, you know, those surveys back from families, that maybe they'll pop over that 50% threshold because they're really, really close. So hopefully all the Foothills families, turn in your family income surveys. I know. I know. Yes. Okay, moving on to enrollment stabilization. So another piece of good news from the legislature. They basically compared our current enrollment to the enrollment pre-pandemic, and whatever student loss we had, which we all probably remember, we lost around 300 students over that time. Basically, they ran that number through the current formulas and then are funding us for half of that. So they're backfilling half of our enrollment and revenue loss. So that's, again, one-time funds, approximately $1.3 million at this point. We're waiting on final data for that. But in perspective, that's about 1.5% of our budgeted state revenues. So, we're not looking at a 20% budgeted gain or anything. Also, the bill behind it changed the levy equalization and levy match formulas and the data that we use to drive those revenues. So we'll be going over that when we talk about the revenues. I think it's the end of April. So we'll see that change, but it looks at this point like a positive impact as well. Okay, this is where things can get confusing, so we'll go slow. So just on a high level for context, as we talked about, state funding is really driven by enrollment. And essentially what happens is the state takes our enrollment values, runs them through a lot of formulas, and those formulas drive staffing units. They drive staffing units for teaching, they drive staffing units for counselors, nurses, principals, like just everything, custodians, you get a picture. So that's really at the high level how it functions, and then those staffing units are applied to values that represent salary and benefit allocations. So it's all just one big massive formula function based on enrollment as a driving factor. Unfortunately, most of the categories don't drive a realistic amount of staffing. More so, I believe, heavily on the classified side, but there's also some certified positions that are dramatically underfunded, which we talked about in our levy as well. Nurses, counselors, those types of positions are dramatically underfunded at this point. And the pandemic really put a spotlight on that and kind of, helped us show our cause, right? We've been saying this for years and years and years, and, here it is. So, that has promoted some positive changes. So the first thing is, I think we all probably know, right, that when you go to the grocery store and things are a little more expensive, it's this little thing called inflation. So the legislature realizes that as part of their annual budget process, they provide an inflationary adjustment every year. Last year, what they did, and you'll see that in, we're mostly going to be looking at the highlighted in orange, I guess, columns. So the 2022 supplemental budget is the budget that they just passed. And then the actual IPD, which is the implicit price deflator, and that's the inflationary factor that the state legislature uses in their budgeting. So those are the two values that are really, for sake of this topic, what we're going to look at. So for last school year, the current school year we're in, the state legislature funded us at 2%. So they gave us a 2% inflation. But in actuality, the state actual inflation was about 5%. But the state only funded us for the 2. Then going into next school year, their projected actual inflation is about 2.8%. But in an effort to make up for the difference last year, they're providing us 5.5% for this year in inflationary changes and increased funding. Really, what the budget writers we're looking to do is align with actual inflation that's happened since about 2017-18 school year, which was right around when the McCleary and the big funding changes came through. The inflationary rebase also applies to material supply and other costs. I think, like, again, we all know things cost more and we're feeling that on our side too. Don't go to the gas station. Okay. Any questions on that before we dive into this?
I have a question on the IPD. And I don't know if this is a Kelly question or a you question, but we have a variety of collective bargaining agreements that we tagged at IPD. Was that a fixed IPD at the time, or is that going to be using these numbers for IPD?
So we have a variety of language in our contracts. It kind of really just depends on the group, but whatever the contract language states is what we will be following.
I was just wondering for those ones that we did, if that IPD is specified to a past time or if it's
I would have to look, but I
forward.
don't believe that it's specified to a year, but Kelly can chime in.
Okay. Sorry.
Yeah, it's not specified to a year. So if it says IPD, it will be this IPD that Jeanette is presenting.
Okay.
So the next piece of good news ties into the staffing units that we were just talking about previously. So the staffing units for nurses, social workers, psychologists, and counselors have been very low for a very long time. And so the legislature provided increased staffing ratios and allocations for what they're calling social or physical, social, and emotional support staff. They're also referring to it as SEL, social emotional learning staff. Eventually, I hope that they just call it one thing instead of two. But really, it provides enhanced staffing units for those categories. It also groups those staffing units along with safety and security, classified staff, and parent involvement coordinators into one bucket. So once they're in one bucket, we are held to staffing unit compliance. So essentially, however many staffing units were funded, not necessarily for nurses, social workers, et cetera, individually, but as a group, if we're funded for 50 staffing units, but we only employ 40 of those, then we will only get 80% of the funding. So we will not get the 50 staffing units, we'll get the 40 staffing units at the end of the day. Again, those are just example numbers, but it's very similar in ways to the K-3 class size compliance. So if we don't hit the compliance factor, then we get proportionately less revenue and less staffing units in our K-3 class sizes. We're also allowed to count contracted providers. So if we contract with an outside company to provide those staff, then we are able to count those units as well, as long as they fit within the physical, social, and emotional support staff bracket. So we're going to go through a series of slides that kind of dives deeper into this, but we are actually going to add an agenda item on April 12th to really talk about this and what it means for Wenatchee School District, because it is a large shift and it's a multi-year shift. So it's not just a one-time flash in the pan, it's phased in over the next 3 years. So one, that gives us some time to really be thoughtful about it and make sure that we're, doing what's right by the system and the school district. But also, it presents its own challenges when it's not just a flash in the pan. So this table shows the number of kinder through 6th grade students that generate one staffing unit of funding. So, and these are not Wenatchee School District numbers. This is how many students, based on the state formula, does it take to generate even one? So the 21-22, that's current funding. So you see it takes 811 K-6 students to generate one counselor worth of funding at the K-6 level. Our buildings, elementary buildings are K-5, but the state funds at a K-6. Then going down, nurses, social workers, psychologists, safety, and parent involvement. Looking at those 21-22 values. Then, you roll to the right and see those numbers drop. Essentially, the counselors drop roughly in half, the nurses drop a lot more than in half, and so on. So, it's great that this state is recognizing kind of what we've known all along, right? We've known, we need more, 5,200 K-6 students. We don't even have that many K-6 students, and that's almost our whole entire school population to generate one nurse. So, hopefully this helps get us to a healthier point.
So when you hear the term prototypical funding model, this is what it is. This is the things that frustrate superintendents and CFOs when they say this is what your prototypical school should look like. I've been in a large district of 42,000 students. You'd be hard pressed to generate any numbers, and then you put that to a 7,500 student district. This is why our levies have been so important in the past. Why we continue to support different aspects that the state doesn't because of these numbers. So when you hear that prototypical, that's what she's talking about.
Yeah, and I guess a quick side note on that. The prototypical school model was developed quite a number of years ago. And other than class size, there has not been much change at all to the factors. So this change is very, very dramatic in a good way for schools.
What is parent involvement?
So parent involvement coordinators. I know at our elementaries, and Kelly can chime in too. So we have parent involvement coordinators that help connect families with the schools. And most of those are funded through special programs and things like that, because the state does not provide very much funding for support outside of that. But essentially it's another staff support person in the office to help connect families to their schools.
Is this our family advocacy people?
Yes. That was the term I was searching for in the back of my head. Okay. Next. So the next grade band is 7-8. So these numbers are even more jaw-dropping. So 21-22, which is currently where we're at, 7,200 students, which is pretty close to the size of our school district, fund one nurse. My favorite is this psychologist at 216,000, which I have heard numerous times from state presentations. We don't even have 216,000 7th and 8th graders in the whole state. So yeah, really doing a lot of good there. But we're working in the right direction here. We dropped about $200,000 or 200,000 off of that student count. Oh, I'll jump back here too. It's sad, but unfortunately, parent involvement coordinators are not funded at the secondary levels. So that's just something to work on for next legislative session. Doesn't mean we don't have them or can't have them. It just means they're not provided in our state funding formula. So here's the same information for 9-12, a little less jaw-dropping, but again, definitely that good movement in the right direction. Any questions on that? Okay, so what are the impacts to us? The impacts are, again, in April, we will be coming to the board with the specific impacts and plans for the new physical, social, emotional support staff category and implementation of that House bill, which is House Bill 1664. Then also looking at the end of April, hopefully the state revenue projection tool will be available. That's a big, cross your fingers. There's been some pretty big legislative changes, and it takes them a little while to get that system up and running. So we will try our best. Also, hopefully with some finalized staffing plans, and then again, that continued enrollment analysis. So just a reminder of our budget timeline, that April 12th ad is in bold. So we will have a full April talking about lots of budget. Any questions?
Just quickly, briefly, just for our, if it's okay, Paul, I would like to send these to you to push out to the rest of the board, some really good resources. So a couple of House bills or Senate bills that of interest here, well, requirements, are the language access. I know we do some of this, but now we're going to be required to do some data entry in regards to the language access and submit a plan. And so again, that goes with the whole strategic plan and equity piece, public meeting accessibility, kudos, because I believe we are already doing everything that's going to be required of school districts, which, allow people for public comments, post in our meetings, public comments, remote or in person, posting our meetings, our agendas. And then lastly, is the weapons at school board meetings. We have to post signage where school board meetings are being held in regards to, it's prohibited to knowingly carrying firearms or weapons. So there's no budget for that, but they say it's minimal.
The cost of printing signs.
Yeah.
One thing I did forget to mention, and it's tagging off of a comment Julie made at the last meeting as well. The prejudgment interest bill, which was Senate Bill 5155. So that bill ultimately died during the legislative process. But I wanted to kind of talk about what the impacts of that bill could have been, because they could have been pretty large for the districts across the state of Washington. So essentially, what that bill would have done is it would have allowed interest to accrue from the date that the action occurred, rather than the date of the verdict being handed down. So, years later, months later, that kind of thing. Also, the original version included school districts, but before it passed through the Senate, public agencies, including schools, were actually removed from the bill in an amendment. So, the large matters of concern for the district are, it could become quite a challenge to settle things out of court if people know that if they get to the court level, they could potentially have a larger settlement. So that would potentially negatively impact the district if we were to have a legal challenge. Also, we have insurance companies that represent us in a lot of things, most things, especially those types of things. And there was a lot of concern from insurance providers. What does this mean liability wise for them and risk wise for them? And are they even going to be able to continue to insure school districts, which as the CFO, which liability is a large part of my job, that really is cause for concern for me. And even if we were able to find an insurance company that would support us, it would be very expensive. Very, very, very expensive. So just something to kind of keep on our radar going into next legislative session. I know that the bill had a lot of support from some legal teams and things like that. So just something we got to really keep our eye on for next year.
Thanks very much, Jeanette. Paul, do you have anything more?
Oh, outstanding. Outstanding work. The other piece that I would just highlight, a couple board members brought it up. I just want to again publicly thank the learning and teaching team, Teresa and Shane for coming out and working with our board and administrative team at the workshop yesterday. It was just outstanding. And I would echo what Catherine said. If a community members want to see what the board does and the work they're doing, I would highly recommend watching yesterday's workshop. It was outstanding. And just huge kudos to our learning and teaching team. Again, the two educators who took time out of their day to support us. That's it for me.
Thank you. Okay. The school board will now recess into executive session for a period of 15 minutes to evaluate the qualifications of an applicant for public employment or to review the performance of a staff member. Pursuant to District Policy Number 1410 and RCW 42.30.110, this discussion will be closed to the public. The school board is not expected to take final action following the executive session. Thank you.
Pete or Martin, are we going to have, can you guys hear me? Oh. Ron, can you hear me?
The executive session is extended for an additional 15 minutes. I now adjourn the meeting after 30 minutes of executive session.